Hi, everybody. Welcome to Lara Chat Live, episode number 28. I'd like to welcome my co-hosts, Eric Van Johnson and Matt Lance. I'm also your host, co-host, whatever you want to call it, Sean Mazies. And we have a very special guest today in Joe Ferguson here. I'm sure a lot of you would know Joe from Twitter. That's where I see a lot of his tweets and retweets about PHP, and he's a pretty darn worthy follow in that world. Plus, beyond that, Joe has also been working with OSMI, Open Source Mental Illness. We wanted to, start talking about OSMI and talk a little bit about like the work-life balance. Not so much a technical topic today, but something that's really important. As developers, I feel that we spend a lot of time working and not having that work-life balance because we're so addicted to code. I assume same thing stands for you guys, but I know Matt, definitely. You guys coding until 2 a.m. every night. But with that being said, I'd like to welcome Joe, and thank you for coming on the air, Joe.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, whenever you want to talk about OSMI, I'm there. I love talking about OSMI. So yeah, where do you want to start?
Well, I think first off, let's talk a little bit about yourself. What are you doing? What are you up to? What excites you in this world?
So currently, I am on the job market, going through the process of finding a new job. I was recently laid off by my previous employer, which is never a fun thing, but that's kind of what happens when companies merge and stuff comes together. So currently, I'm on the job market and been going through interview process, and that's always fun to a certain extent. It's always cool to see what's out there, but it's always terrifying too. Other than that, I've been working on open source stuff now that I have all this free time on my hands. I did a couple pull requests into Homestead today, and I did a couple pull requests today and yesterday into Laravel.io, and just trying to keep up to date with the Fergie, the IRC bot stuff. Did a couple updates to that today. So yeah, my open source profile is doing very well with me being out of work. So that's just kind of how it goes. I got to keep the brain going and kind of got to keep everything, keep all the knives in the block sharp.
That's pretty awesome. Sorry to hear about your the layoff situation. I've been there. I can't speak for the other guys, but yeah, it's no fun. But it's a bit exciting to venture out and see what opportunities are out there, what's different, and so I wish you luck in that regard. And if anybody's listening and looking for a great developer and a great person, here's your chance. Ladies, he's available.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is the first time in my technical career where I've actually been able to job hunt out in the open. Previously, it was always the scenario where I didn't want to tell a current employer that I was looking or wanting to leave. So it's kind of always been back channel. I've never been able to do essentially what I did this time, was where I just posted a blog post saying, hey, I like to solve really hard problems. I have this kind of experience and I like doing these kinds of things. If you're hiring, let me know. And that, combined with a really awesome network of friends on social media, has been really helpful in that regard. So I'm not at all discouraged by this. It's definitely a temporary thing, and I'm looking forward to finding the next cool thing to work on.
So, Joe, one of the things we're going to be talking about today is work-life balance. I'm real curious how you manage that when we get to that topic, because I hadn't realized you were so involved with some of these open source projects that I've kind of been watching over the years. I think a lot of people know that you're the creator, maintainer of Homestead, right? That's
maintainer, not the creator, but okay. Definitely maintainer.
Okay. I didn't realize Fergie was your project as well.
It's actually, so I got involved with Fergie about a year to a year and a half ago, where Matthew Turland, who is Elazar on Twitter, was the original author of Fergie, kind of put a request out to Twitter saying, hey, I'm really kind of busy. I'd like to work on some different things. Is there anybody interested in taking this over? And I was in the mindset where async PHP sounded really, really interesting to me. And I was like, oh, okay, well, Fergie uses async PHP in React PHP framework. And I was like, okay, that would be a really cool thing to work on. So I contacted Matthew, and we talked for a little bit back and forth. And I kind of came on as like the active maintainer. And shortly after that, we had a longtime contributor to the project and React PHP framework member, Sesjon Kewitt, who is WearyXmas on Twitter and GitHub. He joined the Fergie project as well, and we've also got Matthew Trask on the project as well. So Matt Trask is pretty much the active lead developer at the moment. I am the Fig representative for Fergie, so I kind of watch the Fig mailing list for where Fergie concerns may come in. And Matthew Turland is kind of in the background, kicking us when we're forgetting to do stuff, or solving the more complex domain level Fergie stuff when it comes to that kind of complexity. So yeah, I have this terrible habit of saying yes to damn near everything.
So Homestead, we're obviously Laravel focused. Homestead has been a huge part of the Laravel development ecosystem. We got the chance to talk a little bit of PHP Tech when we were kind of doing an impromptu roundtable with you on community night. And one of the things that came up, and I want to kind of give you a platform to talk about it more even-keeled maybe, is your opinions on Docker. Where do you see Vagrant and VM, virtual machines in general, moving forward? Do you still think they have a place? Do you have an opinion on Docker? What are your thoughts?
So just to set the record straight, I absolutely love Docker. Despite what you might have heard in the community night recording, I don't know if that recording has surfaced on the internet or not. I might have had a beverage or two, so try not to hold that too hard against me. Also, despite what it may sound like, Chris Tankersley and myself are very good friends, Dragon Man Tank on Twitter. Despite what it probably sounded like when we were arguing back and forth, we are really good friends, and we do a lot of that in jest. So at my previous employer, we were about to start building essentially a Docker hosting platform for internal applications for ourselves. And I was involved with that a good bit, which is one of the sad things. That was like the saddest part about getting laid off, is like I was just in town for this really awesome meeting where we were talking about how we were going to build this container hosting platform for ourselves, and it was going to be really awesome. And now I'm not going to be working on that. But so my big thing with Vagrant is I learned Vagrant. This is like the one chance I get to go like old school, where I was like climbing uphill both ways in the snow, because I learned Vagrant when it was barely functional, when it was still mostly Ruby errors, and when you still actually had to kind of know a little bit of Ruby to even understand what was happening. And that was also when it was essentially VirtualBox and VMware were the only things supported. In the early days when I started playing with it. And it was one of those things where I learned that so well from the ins and outs, just because you had to at that point in time to even use it. And I didn't want to learn the next new thing, which is kind of how I feel about JavaScript frameworks, is I don't go out and learn the next new thing. I just kind of let it sit for a little while, and then I'll go and poke at it a little bit. And I did kind of the same thing with Docker, where Docker was out for a little while. You know, I had a couple of friends using it and telling me how great it was. I looked into Kubernetes a bit, and the Docker, the ECS on AWS, the container service they have. Looked into that kind of stuff a little bit, and kind of wrapped my head around Docker, and really appreciated what it was doing. The biggest thing that I love about Docker is it's the ultimate representation of practice how you play, in terms of you're working on a system that is the exact same thing in production, but even more to the extreme than what virtualization and Vagrant will give you. Because Vagrant will give you a production-like environment. Docker gives you, if you want to, it gives you production on your local machine. You can essentially deploy, and that's how you should be doing your Docker deployments. So it's one of those things where I'm stuck in this middle ground where I love both of these tools, and I think they have definitely their use cases, because I'm still running into a ton of code out in the wild where it's essentially not ready to be put into a container. So this philosophy of Vagrant is outdated and no longer relevant, let's put everything in Docker, is is kind of premature. I think it's not every application is ready to be put into a container just because it wasn't architected that way. It's just like every piece of code out there wasn't written to be testable, so we can't really test it in traditional methods. You would have to refactor it and add tests as you're refactoring. So it's one of those cart and I don't know. I think it's apples and oranges, but I love debating back and forth with people because I'm starting to get to the in-depth knowledge on Docker where I really understand what's going on under the hood. And I've been like that with Vagrant for a while. But I actually got involved with Homestead because Taylor released version 2 of Homestead. I think either the first or the second PHP World Conference. Right after that, he released the version 2 of Homestead. And I absolutely hated it because that's when Homestead went to this global install. And that was not at all how I used Homestead. So ultimately, I spent a bunch of time and hacked up this terrible, terrible library that was essentially per project Homestead. And I essentially made a script that only took what you absolutely had to have from Homestead Global and put it into your project repo. The idea was you would use this to generate Homestead for your project, and you could put it in any project you wanted. Well, I showed that to Taylor, and I was like, do you think this has a place in Homestead? Because I would love official native support for this. And I'm also willing to do all the work. I'm willing to help out, whatever you need to make this happen. And he kind of looked at it, and then a few days later, he came back to me and said, yeah, let's do a PR and see what it looks like. And it kind of went from there. And then after lots and lots of triaging issues and bug reports on Homestead, he just kind of made me a maintainer, and he was like, here, just go deal with this. And that was kind of awesome.
Key to the kingdom, all yours.
At least the Homestead kingdom.
Yeah, that we've had this discussion in the past on a couple other different shows. I think a show we did 2 shows ago, we had Mohammed Zalt, who did Laradoc, if I'm correct in the name, the Laravel Docker container. We talked about pros and cons, and I know for myself, I'm stuck in Vagrant because I grew up in the world of setting up my own server from the ground up, and Vagrant made sense. I could still do that. And Docker's got this mysterious step to it that I have to sit down, play with it, and start to understand it. So I think I'm kind of in that more on the Vagrant side, but kind of stepping into Docker, seeing what it's all about. So it's always interesting to hear, people's opinions about Docker, and a lot of it has been very, very positive. So someday I got to make that jump, I guess. So beyond that, wanted to talk a little bit about maybe not so much the work-life balance yet, but let's talk about OSMI. I had the opportunity to meet, what's his name? Twitter handles Funkatron.
Ed Finkler.
Yes, Ed Finkler. Thank you. Sorry, Ed, I forgot your name. No, he did a really great talk at the Seattle PHP conference last year on GraphQL. It's a great talk. I really learned a lot and really interesting topic. And then he also gave a talk about OSMI and opening source mental illness. And I had the opportunity to actually sit down and talk with him. I think before his talk, he had a booth outside. And we just kind of talked a little bit about, at least in my experience, where companies don't really understand the mental illness aspect. And it's kind of a taboo topic, if you will, where people don't know what opportunity they have to handle their own mental health, and vice versa for companies to be able to support an employee who's going through such issues and considerations. I'd like, if you may, give us a little bit of some education about OSMI, what it offers, what we can learn from it today, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so kind of the short and sweet version on what is open sourcing mental illness and why do we call it, and how do we plan on open sourcing something like mental illness? Because a lot of people who talk to us at conferences, that's the first thing they answer is, they're like, okay, I understand open source and I understand mental health is an issue, but how do you open source that? How do you do that? And well, the first thing we do is where we can, everything we do as an organization is completely open to the public, and where we can, we creative license everything we push out, just from the aspect of that open source philosophy. I mean, Ed was obviously deep into the PHP community. He's also rooted deeply into the Python community. So open source is definitely embraced in both of those communities. So essentially what we're trying to do with OSME is change the way that people are talking about mental health, specifically in the tech area, because that's kind of where we are, and that's where we have seen the biggest need and the biggest gaps in people understanding that they even have mental health issues. I didn't know I had mental health issues until I saw Ed at PHP Tech 2014. He was on a panel with the Mental Health Prompt, which is a different organization. They did a panel where they brought a bunch of speakers in one evening during the conference, and they all were talking about mental health issues. And Ed was just talking about, it was an early version of his Stronger Than Fear mental health and tech talk. And he started talking about the issues and some of the stuff that he was suffering from, and it was like going down a checkbox for me. I was just marking things off, and it was a very awakening experience. And, you know, going back and talking to my wife and talking to other people, it's like, yes, you do have these issues. And it's like, oh, well, now I know what all that stuff is now, and everything makes so much more sense. So some of the initiatives that OSME has been doing or has done so far is, first and foremost, we send Ed to a lot of events. And now that Ed is working full-time for the organization, we're trying to shift that a little bit, where we're not sending him to as many events, but sending other people like myself, other board members, or other volunteers who want to go and spread the message to events. So we cover travel costs where we can. A big thing we did last year in 2016 was we came out with and we worked on and developed 3 what we call handbooks, mental health and tech handbooks. We give them away under the Creative Commons license. We worked with a couple of different doctors to help us write this. That's one of the things, is most of the volunteers of OSME aren't therapists. They're not psychologists, psychiatrists. We're not doctors. We're not here to dispense meds or treatment or tell you, or diagnosis. I mean, that's not what we do. But it's we worked with doctors to come up with these handbooks about the Americans with Disabilities Act law, which is essentially what your employer can and can't do if you have a disability in America, considering in relation to your job. So we have 3 handbooks. One is a general kind of mental health and tech for both sides, both employers and employees, kind of a general overview. And the second book is a guide for employers, which is aimed at C-level organization members, CTOs, CEOs, that kind of thing, on how they can be aware and what they can do to change the company culture around mental health, and also their obligations as an employer under ADA law. And then the third book is aimed at employees, which is their rights and responsibilities as it pertains to ADA law. Now, also, we're not lawyers, so you can't really, we're at best armchair lawyers, so we don't know the law to be able to speak to that. But these handbooks aren't designed to be like your law resource. They're designed to be, what are your responsibilities as an employee? What are your employer's responsibilities? And some of the other things we've done is we've produced a video series for C-level executives. It's free on our YouTube. Ed records as many of his talks as he can. We've started sponsoring conferences, as well as the biggest thing that we started doing early, that's kind of what we're really well known for, is we started doing a mental health and tech survey every year. And every year we've done it, we've gotten more and more responses. And what we do with that data, it's essentially a survey on how you feel about mental health, and how your employer, how you perceive your employer feels about mental health awareness. Do you have health coverage that includes mental health support, and that sort of thing? So it's a relatively medium-sized survey to take. So it's definitely not a 2 question. But what we do is, once we have all these results, is we put them out on a platform called Kaggle. And Kaggle is a data science platform where somebody can just go drop a ton of data, and people who are data scientists or data scientist enthusiasts, it's like GitHub for data science is probably the best example, where you can go download somebody's data and do all kinds of cool analysis with it. We've had several people do a lot of really neat things with our data sets. We've had one gentleman he's written 3 blog posts now talking about trends he's starting to see in some of the data that we've got. So the mental health and tech survey, which is actually something we should be launching for this year relatively soon. We just finished up a big round of fundraising to get us through the next year. So yeah, we're going to be doing the 2017 survey soon.
Wow, interesting. You mentioned US. Is this US only, these handbooks, or is it open globally?
So the ADA laws, unfortunately, yeah, it's going to be US specific. Anybody can go and download the handbooks. You can get them for absolutely free. You can get them from, we have a store on LeanPub where you can donate some money to us if you want, totally optional. So the guidebooks are going to be mostly US specific in terms of law, but they're perfectly reasonable for everyone. I mean, it's just good things to know about it. But yeah, the law specific parts will be unique. The organization is actually a 501c3 nonprofit, which is essentially, it's a corporation, but it's a we're not making any money corporation. So in the US, you can actually get tax benefits for donating to the organization. Unfortunately, as it stands now, we don't have any official presence outside of the US in terms of official organizations. I had golden dreams of having our first external to the US, our first international chapter or other organization be led up in the UK by our board member, Gary Hawken. But it turns out that whole Brexit thing may make that a little bit weird and difficult. So we'll have to.
Sean, there's your opportunity. OSMI Canada. OSMIA.
OSMIA. That'll be the slogan. We'll have a little A added to the stickers. I'm sure Ed can make this happen. We know people. But no, I mean, we're definitely interested in, like, we have a great volunteer network, mostly people in the US and in Eastern Europe. We're starting to get other people involved, and we're definitely, I mean, if you want to get involved, you can email info@osmihelp.org, and that goes to all the board members. We have an onboarding process. So yeah, we you know, we're definitely looking for volunteers like everybody else, like all the other nonprofits are. But yeah, if mental health is something that is important to you, we're a pretty awesome organization, but I'm probably a little biased.
So you mentioned, you know, complete, that's considered a charity, right? The 501c3?
Right. We're a 501c3. You can go find, I don't think we filed a 990 yet. But yeah, you can go find us on it's a I hate to say it this way because it feels like it cheapens it, but we're a real thing, I promise. You can go look us up on all the US charities sites. You can if you need, we have an EIN, which is what you use when you donate to us to file your taxes. You can write off that you donated this much money, and depending on how much money it is, you get a nice little write-off. But the big thing that we're going after is actually companies to do it, because we can give companies larger financial support.
I was going to mention that you do have corporate sponsors, and Laravel being one of them.
Yes.
I guess Taylor stepped up to become a bronze member.
He was the first corporate sponsor that signed up. Yes, I believe he was the first corporate sponsor. If he wasn't the first, he was the second. So yeah,
one of the first.
Yeah, one of the first for sure. But yeah, he stepped up really early in the process. I mean, I think it was like day 2 of Ed going, "Hey, we should do this." And I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it." And we hadn't even fleshed out yet. And Taylor was like, "Yeah, here's some money." And we're like, "You're awesome." And he also signed we bought some of, we bought out PHP Architect of all the Laravel elephants. And then we also had to back channel a few extras and from an undisclosed source. And we had to slide some money his way, but we got our hands on some more. And Taylor signed a bunch of elephants for us. and we gave those away during this last fundraiser. So that was a lot of fun to make happen and see people get really excited about that kind of stuff.
That's super nice.
You know what I really like?
I was
sorry,
let
me just interject here. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Eric. What I really liked is how Joe said, like, Taylor is like, I got your money. It's like he's the mafia boss here. I got your money right here.
I guess you guys want to do something, I'll help you out. No, the other thing I was going to mention, and being an old Cake PHP person myself, is to see how Cake DC stepped in as a diamond partner. And I mean, just that alone, showing the love from the PHP community between Laravel and Cake PHP for these corporate sponsors, that has to feel good for Ed and the team, huh?
Oh, absolutely. So Cake DC, which is, if you're not aware, I wasn't aware until Ed explained this to me. Cake DC is the company behind Cake PHP, kind of like Zend is the company behind Zen Framework. It's similar between Cake PHP and Cake DC. They have been supporters of ours from early on. They were the first to devote income donations specifically for Ed's salary. Ed went to Larry and pretty much said, "Hey, I'm going to do this full time." And Larry was like, "Well, we're ready to pledge $1,000 a month to your salary for at least a year. Let's see what we can do." So yeah, Cake DC has been really awesome to OSME. It's also really great, like you said, to see Cake DC coming into this as well as Laravel. And I would love to get other framework support, especially if we can get those backing companies to support. Also, the PHP Diversity Elephant Project was helping us as well. In terms of kind of awareness and talking about OSME when it as it relates to diversity during that campaign. So we've been working a little bit with them, very high level kind of thing. And the company that does the elephants also donated a portion of their profits from last year to OSME this past, or it was earlier this year or late last year. So we've had tremendous support from the PHP community. Kind of what we're doing now is not really leaving the PHP community behind, but trying to expand that. And because most of us are from the PHP community, we're trying to get out of that like kind of a bubble and get out into the Python community and the Ruby communities as well. So it's been an experience. It's been really reassuring as well to see all these big companies come onto it, especially a small company like Laravel. I mean, a company with 2 employees is devoting that much money to mental health. That says a lot.
Definitely a major prop to Laravel for that. So 2 questions here I have. Actually, a ton of questions I have. But so one of the first ones I wanted to ask is with regard to, let's say, a company or an individual who works for a company, what can they do to become a sponsor or a supporter of OSMI? I know you talked about the elephant thing you did, and if let's say my company wanted to put some money toward OSMI, what do we do? How do we do it?
So you can go to osmehelp.org/donate, and that will redirect you to a donation page. You can donate directly there. If you just want to do like a one-time, here's some money, we appreciate you kind of donation. If you want to get involved and become, like you said, a sponsor or some kind of partner, you would probably want to email Ed and myself at info@osmehelp.org, and we will get back to you as soon as we can on that kind of stuff. It goes through a different process, just because what we're trying to do with our corporate partners is we're trying to be genuine partners with them and making sure that, hey, what can we do to help your HR department be more aware of mental health issues? What can we do on our end to help support you and your employees? So we are trying to do a little bit more of that this next year. So yeah, that's kind of why we do a little bit different of a process there.
I'm curious about the HR standpoint that you mentioned there. I guess naive question or thought, isn't that HR job to be aware of mental health? Like, is there a disconnect there that you guys have to come in and teach them, train them?
Well, I would assume that would be HR's job, but obviously HR is probably the last department to get staffed in a startup, especially in the tech world. I think a lot of it is either they're outsourcing the HR to a separate company and the company just doesn't care or isn't aware, or that people just don't think it's a problem because they look out at their employees, they look out at that amazing open office area that they hired, and they see the 50 developers they have working on their VC funding and their second round of funding or whatever, and they're like, everybody's here, everybody looks fine, everybody looks like they're being productive, there's nothing wrong with any of my employees, why do we need mental health care? It's not something that you can necessarily easily see. So I think that's why it's overlooked so often. I've never been one to be much of an HR person, and so I'm not sure if that's necessarily what HR's job should be, but I think HR should be aware, at the very least, aware of what the health coverage of the employer offers in terms of mental health.
That makes perfect sense. So then as an employee, you mentioned earlier watching Ed's talk and you were checking off the check marks like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So let's say as an employee, and I want to be able to check off some of these boxes or find out what it is that I'm not aware of, or things that I'm struggling with that I don't even think about it, just a struggle that I accept, that I could possibly get some help. Is there, like, what can I do to find out if I need this extra support?
So there is an excellent book that I think, so I believe it was 2 years ago at Sunshine PHP, Josh Holmes, who works for Microsoft, did a talk, did a keynote, I believe, at Sunshine PHP, and he mentions this book called Driven to Distraction, Recognizing and Coping with Attention Deficit Disorder. And in the back of this book, there is literally a checklist of things that you may suffer from in terms of, well, I have trouble starting and finishing a task. I have trouble staying on track. I have, just not really self-diagnose, but to explain what some of these indicators could be. And my good friend Eli White, who runs the PHP World and PHP Tech conferences, he was the first guest that we did on the OSME podcast, and he talks about being in that talk and hearing Josh talk about that book, and just like what I was saying with Ed, where Eli went through the checklist, and Eli was, and we talked about this on the podcast, and Eli was like, well, I just checked all the boxes. I mean, it was this awakening thing. And then I went to the doctor the next week. It was just one of those things where you don't know there's something wrong because you've always been like this. And that's one of the hardest things for people who don't necessarily suffer from mental health issues, who don't understand what people are going through. It's really hard for them because it's the old thing of, well, have you tried just not being depressed? Or like if people who wear glasses, it's like, have you just tried to squint and that'll solve the problem? It's that kind of justification that people assume is the solution when it comes to mental health. It's really weird. So yeah, I would check out that book, Driven to Distraction. Also, if you want to just, a no monetary investment, just go watch any of Ed's videos. We keep a resources section on the website, and Ed tries to record as many videos as he can. I'm really partial to the one that he did at PHP World last year. That was a really awesome version of that one. He's done quite a few different versions. He does tend to take some liberties with some foul language, so be prepared. He can get a little rowdy. But other than that, yeah, I think that's a good place to start.
It's funny because when I was growing up, I got in computers pretty young, but I was kind of a unique case because I always seemed to straddle that line between the athletes and the nerds. But I'm a little older, and when I was growing up, the people who were in computers.
You forgot batter too. Make sure you mention that for our podcast listeners, please.
When I was growing up, things like Asperger's, those weren't diagnoses that were out there. So everybody just assumed that the nerds who were in the basements working on computers were just inverted people, that they weren't really struggling with anything. They weren't social people. And I think we've learned. I've raised a few kids myself now, and I have memories of growing up in situations where I remember that there were things going on in my head that I couldn't express, that were bothering me, and I didn't know how to articulate them. And I think we grow up in a world now where we're a lot more aware of that. It doesn't necessarily make it easier to identify, but we're definitely more conscious of it. But I don't think we would be where we are with the internet and computer science if there weren't these hyper focused people who just this was their passion. This is what they lived for. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. I have trouble focusing.
Well, there's a checkbox there.
Yeah, we'll check that one out.
Yeah.
I think perhaps that would be a good segue into ourselves as developers and the struggles we have, the people we work with, what we do to kind of. I know myself, Sean. We have families and children. I know Matt's got a very active social life, as he likes to brag about. No, just kidding, Matt. Just kidding. I can do that to you. But what do you guys do? Do you guys find it challenging to keep your social life, your family life, and your work life all balanced and happy?
I think see, this one I think I can answer because a bit of background for myself. I have a wife and 2 kids. I have a full-time job where I'm a senior lead engineer here, so I'm responsible for a lot of things. I also have my own side projects and products that hopefully become startups or companies someday. I also do a lot of mentorship, PHP, meetup communities, and of course this podcast. So I'm pretty busy. And I don't know how I balance. I don't know. I don't think I balance it well all the time. So the way I think my life goes is I come to work, then I go home, have dinner, spend some time with the family, then the family goes to bed, and then I work again. If I have a deadline, I just work constantly. Weekends, I'll get up early and work. It's something that I've done for so long that I don't know how to be different, if that makes sense. Now, that kind of segues into the work-life balance part, where I work a lot and I don't know how to live life without working a lot. I don't know if you guys have that same problem.
I think there's a lot of factors to it. I know myself, I do a lot of self-identifying through my work. So it's and I think that's the case for a lot of developers, or a lot of even just guys in general. I think a lot of them kind of identify themselves kind of partially through their employment, or not necessarily employment, but through their career, as it were, right? So I mean, I think that adds to the challenges. And I mean, I know for me, it's like, I love working on stuff, but at the same time, I burn out sometimes, and I'm just like, I can feel it, like I don't want to move. I don't want to be more active. I'm just like, I'm done. I'm toast. My brain can't think anymore. It just needs to stop all things. And then I end up doing weird, like, binge watching of classic TV shows and stuff like that, where it's just like, nope, just need to escape now. I'm done for the next little bit. But I mean, one of the things I have really admired about the OSME group, and just any of the groups that are kind of pioneering these discussion boards, is that it's not just opening up the community to discussing these matters, but it helps open many people to their own like, I can't think of the right word for this, but it opens you up to your own issues, I guess, is one way to put it. Like, it's so easy to just keep going and just keep moving forward, but then when you start seeing how other people are reacting to it, or that maybe what you're going through is actually shared by everyone, and it's not really okay, you kind of just get a little more comfortable with the idea of acknowledging that whole situation.
So, Joe, in light of like a work-life balance, the way I'm viewing OSMI is, more about mental illness, mental health support. Is there an avenue that OSMI can help with people who are starting to suffer burnout or starting to reach that point of just too much work?
I'm not sure that we have anything in place at the moment for that kind of thing. I'm not even sure where, where we would, where we'd start with that. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that, that I had a long talk with Ed about, when he went full time with Osme a couple of weeks ago. Ed and I talked, and it was very much a, hey, you are not going to work 24/7. You are not going to do Osme 24/7. Because that's going to burn you out and kill you and me, because I'm going to have to manage you, or somebody's going to have to manage you, or some there's going to be management happening somewhere. And I think with Ed being so hyper aware of his challenges and his issues, that it's easier for him to I don't know, maybe it's easier for him to recognize. It's easier for me to recognize when I'm getting burnt out, and it's made juggling all of the different things and projects I'm involved with a little bit easier, just to avoid that burnout. I burned out hard a couple of years ago, in July. My best friend had just moved away, and I was in total F everything mode. I just shut down. I was just burned out from trying to do too much. Work was driving me crazy, and it wasn't helping the situation. So I just quit everything I was doing for about 6 months and recharged. And I learned a lot about myself in that time, essentially, how I deal with burnout and taking on too much, and just how I schedule my time. And that's one of the things that I'm constantly trying to reevaluate is what am I doing with my time, and how I'm scheduling it.
You mentioned you're better at recognizing when I guess, these burnout signs. Did I get that correctly?
Yeah. Well, I'm better at recognizing when I'm going to get burnout, and the triggers of what's going to of where where I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. That's my number one trigger of, okay, it's time to either put some things on the back burner or delegate.
Yeah. Okay. So that's where I think we're in agreement here, where over the years I've started to kind of learn some of the same things and be better at, oh, this is too much. I need to say no, or I need to, and back away. And I think one of the things I learned is sometimes you hit that burnout point and then you just don't want to do anything. You say, screw it, and just disappear. And then that's where everybody starts to get mad, worried, frustrated, and that's not a good place. So what I've learned is, once I've started to feel that kind of burnout, I'll communicate to my clients, to my stakeholder, to my coworker, like, okay, I'm overloaded. I need help. I call that out, and I think it's okay to be able to say, hey, this is too much. I need help. And I've found that there's a lot of companies out there that are supportive, and they'll say, okay, well, again, does the company have enough money to hire someone for you to delegate? Number one, but people are supportive. Maybe that deadline isn't as hard of a deadline as you thought. I think if we always remember to communicate, that we can pull back easier, and then we don't end up in a situation where people are making assumptions about you. But I also recognize that sometimes it's hard to recognize you're hitting your wall until it's too late.
Yeah, if you're in a situation where you go to an employer and say, look, I'm burning out, I'm not able to do this. If your employer just tells you to buck up and keep going, you're in the wrong job. That is a bad manager / bad employer, and you should definitely look to change that. I've been in those situations before, not in the tech industry, but I've been, when I worked retail many years ago. That was essentially the scenario. Oh, you're tired? Too bad. Go do it. Go get the job done. And that's something that you've just got to kind of change the situation, because that situation is usually never going to change itself.
As the owner of a small business, I just want to say to the Diego Dev employees listening, we do not endorse Joe's opinions. Why are you watching this? Get back to work.
That's a fair statement. That's a fair statement. You guys got better stuff to do.
It's funny because, and Sean hit on it as well, deadlines. One of the liberating things I consciously did years ago was stop caring about deadlines for the most part. So many deadlines are just these self-imposed finish lines that somebody who typically isn't a developer, some PM somewhere just decided, okay, we'll have this done by, 2 weeks. And it becomes this massive effort where everybody feels like, oh, this has to be done in 2 weeks. And really, nobody's going to die. Like, the company's not going to lose money. This doesn't have to be done in 2 weeks. Stay focused on getting your work completed, but don't have this sense of panic where it needs to be done. And for the most part, I try to avoid deadlines. I'm not a fan of deadlines. Our whole business model, the way we structured our company, is to discourage deadlines. We do this whole retainer approach with our clients just so that they don't have the sense of, hey, I'm going to pay you for 2 weeks. I need this done in 2 weeks. Because it's an unhealthy situation for everyone involved. So deadlines is something I'm just so adamantly opposed to. I'm not a fan of them at all.
Yeah, last show we had Sanaz, who is a project manager that I work with. Maybe we need to get her back and you guys go at it in some kind of battle royale, project manager versus CTO, everyday man kind of thing. And also any Diego Dev employees who are still listening, there's your endorsement. There are no deadlines. So we're getting close to the top of the hour here. I'm going to try and start wrapping it up. We have one of the questions from one of our LaraChat members who reached out to me. So I'm just going to pull it up here. So what are some common attitudes that Joe thinks may be key contributors to mental illness in software development?
Was looking for like indicators,
like some attitudes, like maybe like a project manager or a CTO like Eric, or CEO putting pressure on the developer deadline. For example, you have to get this done, and let's say the developer works 24 hours. I mean, that's not realistic, but those are some things that can lead towards a mental illness, I'm assuming. Are there any other kinds of attitudes that can really take an employee or developer's mental health the wrong way?
I think any situation where you have to make a choice over your health and something else is a red flag. I don't know that that's necessarily going to lead to a mental illness, but it's definitely a red flag for the environment. Or that job, whatever the situation may be. If any employer or superior is holding your health over you like that, or expecting long, crazy hours, unless you work for NASA and death is actually on the line with the code you write, it's not really worth your health. I mean, there's other jobs out there. There's better places to work than somebody that's going to kind of try to take advantage of you feeling guilty because you're not working 40 hours every 3 days or something. So I think the one thing that we try to push with OSME in terms of people who want to help but not sure where to start is we really push and advocate for people to go get what's called mental health first aid, which is essentially a day-long course that you'll go and usually it's some kind of doctor or psychiatrist that does these sessions, where they teach you how to identify and how to react to someone who may be having a mental health episode or a break or something like that. Turns out the first thing that you say is not, "Are you crazy?" That's not what you say to somebody that's having a mental health issue. But in all seriousness, it's one of those really good things. It's just like a standard first aid course on, how do you help somebody that's hurting, is how do you help not really handle, but what can you do to respond to somebody that you may be suffering some kind of mental health break? Because it's not like they are having a heart attack. It's not, you're not really going to see a visible wound, but you're going to see them distraught. You're going to see them suffering in some way, and they're usually going to keep it to themselves. So we're really big advocates of people going out and getting open source, the mental health first aid training. My wife and I are going in July. They're finally coming back to Memphis, or they're doing one in Memphis. So we're going to be doing that. Ed has gone through it. Several of our volunteers have gone through it. We highly recommend it.
I think that kind of called out to, I guess, my personal mindset of, the overworking leading toward the mental health issue. And that's not always the case. There's a lot of other factors in this world that can create any mental health illness. So something where I'm assuming the OSME books can help out.
Well, the books really aren't going to tell you about indicators or factors. The books are more about your responsibilities and your responsibilities and rights in terms of your employer. Like you can have a disability such as a mental health issue, and your employer has to make adequate accommodations for that kind of thing, depending on the severity, just like they would if you were in a wheelchair, or if you were missing a limb and you had to have some kind of work adjustment. That's where more of the OSME books are going to help. If you're looking for like an indicator thing, or some affliction that you may have that you may think may be mental health based, I would start with that book, Driven to Distraction, and go from there.
I'm kind of curious about, I'm just kind of curious about your opinion on this, Joe. I was actually at a Laravel meetup the other day, and they were talking about different one-on-one platforms, and it seems like that's becoming more and more popular because they're doing Slack integration to create, so I can communicate issues to my, higher ups and stuff like that. And I'm wondering if you see there being an opportunity maybe in those sort of one-on-one, apps and stuff like that, or those sort of communication platforms, to be able to open up, like, not like a machine learning component where it's actually going to analyze conversational habits and stuff like that. But do you think there's an opportunity or a potential ground for helping people learn more about what they may be unaware that they're feeling and stuff like that?
I think that could definitely be a thing. So right now, I know that there are services out there where you could do one-on-one chats with health professionals, mental health professionals specifically. It's a form of therapy where you can go get therapy like that. I don't know. I think that's an interesting use case for AI. Would be speech recognition or analysis on what they're typing, how they're conveying ideas back and forth to other people, and I think that would definitely be an interesting service. I think that technology would. It's really easy to do evil things with that that kind of stuff, right? But that's definitely interesting. In terms of like one-on-one with your managers and stuff, I was in a really lucky situation with my previous job where I could talk to my direct boss about anything I wanted. I mean, I had a really awesome boss, and he knew all about my issues because I told him, because it was this thing where, oh, hey, by the way, I'm running a mental health organization now. And that can be a kind of awkward situation where it's like, oh, well, why did you get involved with that? It's like, oh, well, it turns out I have all these things. So I was really lucky. And I urge people that if you feel like you can talk to your direct report to on that kind of level, definitely do it. It definitely explains away a lot of the sick days you may have to take, the non-productive days. It's definitely helpful. But I totally understand if you can't. I have been in that position too, where I would be terrified to tell my boss that I was having a bad day. I would just call in with the flu versus call in with depression, right? But they're both totally valid reasons to take a sick day and miss a day of work.
Well, I think we're probably going to have to wrap up here. I think this topic has been absolutely informative. I can't quite find the right word, but I'm feeling like I'm going to walk away with my mind opened a bit more. Some more research I'm going to have to do to learn about mental illness, work-life balance as an individual, as an employer, and as an employee. There's a lot of things that we all can do to improve our situations and other people's situations. But I really encourage, anybody who listened to this on the podcast or the live show later on, please check out the website. It's, and correct me if I'm wrong here, osmihelp.org.
That's it.
osmihelp.org. If anybody is a willing donator, please get in touch. osmihelp.org/donate. If anybody is looking for help, there's the books, there's information. I guess they can also contact you directly on LaraChat Slack if they're there, or Twitter, or email info@osmihelp.org. Can't believe I remembered all that. Beyond that, I would like to say thank you to Eric and Matt for being co-hosts today. We actually got a couple more words out of Matt today than we usually do. So 3 cheers, Matt.
He's coming along nicely. Yeah, I do want to take a moment and thank Joe again for coming on. This is such a great topic. Obviously, an hour podcast is not enough time to really kind of get into everything that everyone likes to discuss. But I'm glad that you came onto the show and gave us an opportunity to talk through some of this.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for having me. I've enjoyed it.
And yeah, I guess that with that being said, we have our GitHub giveaway, yearly subscription, 1-year subscription to GitHub. It is June. I know that we actually have a tweet out. I just don't remember that hashtag. Guys, anybody? Bueller?
Oh man, dang it, this had us up too. I shut down my tweet deck because I was trying to, I don't know. I don't remember, boss. It would have been nice if it was something involving
Meltdown. LaraChat Meltdown. That's it, right?
That seems like a bad bad handle for the show here, Sean. I'm just gonna point that one out.
Oh, that was unintentional. Oh boy. We're gonna be canceled, everybody. No show next time. Anyway, if you want to win if you want to win the GitHub 1-year GitHub personal account, just check LaraChat Slack on Twitter, all one word, and retweet to win. It's there somewhere.
LaraChat Meltdown. Yep,
it is.
Oh dear. We're all getting fired. With that being said, I'm signing off. Have a great night and week, and cheers, everybody.
Life.
Yeah.
Bye. Thanks.